Hello, 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 and welcome to Property Gamechangers Live. And we are here every Friday, 7 p.m., Property Gamechangers Facebook page. And grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and join us in conversation with people who have changed the game in property. Each week, we'll be celebrating the power of ethical property investing to change lives, and we'll be blasting the myth that you need a lot of money to get started in property and inspiring each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. Game changers in our own lives, in our families' lives, in our communities, and in our world. And this evening's guest is doing something truly game-changing in property that I know that you're going to love. After 20 years in the NHS as a nurse, she decided to follow her love of property and formed Pebble Properties. So some of you will already know who I'm talking about. She develops properties for vulnerable adults and is passionate about supported living as an ethical form of property investment. She is the host of Lisa Live, a series of interviews with people working and investing in supported living. And she has an active Facebook group, which I totally love and which you need to join, which is called Supporting Living, Property Investing with a Difference. So let's welcome to the show Lisa Brown of Pebble Properties. It all worked. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. What a lovely welcome. Thank you so much.
It's amazing to have you with us. How's your day been today? We talked a little bit before, and it sounded like it had been quite.
On this chair I've done, I think, 4.5, 5 hours of Zoom meetings today. So I literally feel like I need to go and move my body a bit somewhere.
Yeah. And I was saying that when we first started off in lockdown, I was busy doing my hot yoga at home, feeling quite smug. And then for the last goodness knows how many weeks, I've done nothing at all.
It's hard to be motivated, isn't it? The whole time. It's a very strange time at the moment, isn't it? It's very, very odd. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm glad that you're here. And we're going to get into your story and everything that you're doing in property and beyond. And if you're watching on Facebook, please give Lisa a like and ask any questions that you have about this supported living and going into this type of property investment. But for a moment, Lisa, let's go back a little bit and tell us a little bit about younger you and your story growing up.
I grew up in Bedford. I was very, very square at school. I was very I was going to go do well at GCSEs, do well at A-levels, go to university. I had a very clear kind of plan. And I spent my year out in Thailand teaching English and in a big secondary school and a refugee camp. And then, that was me really. And then suddenly I was...
A refugee camp, wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting. That was fascinating. And really... Yeah, it was, at 18 to be suddenly running a summer school in a refugee camp with and living in the camp and being part of the community and being welcomed into that community by the Karen people who were refugees from Burma living just on the Thai-Burma border. That was really powerful, really formative for me. And I knew at that point I'd already got a place to do nursing at university. So I knew I was going to do nursing, and just really solidified my real desire to do nursing, because I just saw all of these issues and I just felt like I wanted to come back and do something with that later in my life.
Do you know what? I totally get that from you. You've just got such a caring aura that really comes over just meeting you as a little bit as I have done. So there you were. You went into nursing, and bring us up to date with. What was your life like just before you decided to get into property? What was it that sort of made you think that this might be the way forwards?
Well, I went and worked in the East End of London in a very busy A&E department once I qualified with my nursing qualification. And I thought I'll do that for 6 months and go travelling. And I ended up meeting a paramedic and falling in love with him and getting a bit stuck. And then career-wise, it seemed to make sense that we both stayed where we were. So I ended up working in that A&E department for a long time. Absolutely loved it. Worked my way up to senior sister, emergency nurse practitioner. Really enjoyed it. Had 2 boys. Went back part-time after having the lads. But it reached a point, because my husband was, like I said, a paramedic, so we were juggling shifts. So it reached a point where I was like, actually, weekends suddenly became a bit more precious. So I went, part of my nursing qualification, I had also got a health visiting qualification. It was a dual course. So I went back and I decided it was time to go and work in the community and work school hours around things. So I went and did that. And then we reached a point where we realised we kind of moved to Essex, and we moved out of London to Essex. And the plan for that had been just a short-term move again. We'll only just be here for a bit. We'll bring our children up by the coast. That'd been the long-term plan. And then you kind of get stuck and you make friends, and it was really great. But we just suddenly realised actually the boys were at a point that if we didn't move, it would be really, really hard to move. So we decided to move to Devon about 3 years ago.
Oh, lovely. Yeah,
it is. It's really, we live in such a beautiful place. It's fabulous. And I suppose naively in some ways thought it would be easy to get senior nursing work. I've always, since I've had the lads, I've worked school hours really, because my younger son's visually impaired. So childcare is just that bit more complicated. It's, life's just a little bit more complicated. So school hours works really well for me. And I'd done that for such a long time. I kind of felt I would easily get that work. And it was moving down here, they were like, no, we only want senior staff to be completely full-time. I was quite frustrated, because I knew that what I would do in a 6-hour day, some people might do in a 7.5-hour day. And I knew, it's just that thing. And so I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And I decided, I thought, well, I've always loved property, absolutely loved property. And without really realizing it, we'd kind of done the buy, refurbish, refinance model on our own homes, so we'd kind of ended up with quite a bit of equity in our own property. So I thought, actually, perhaps we'll pull some money out and buy a holiday let where we live. It's very beautiful. And, actually, maybe I should just run that. When I started looking at the figures on that, I was like, well, actually, it's a bit risky if we don't get the occupancy. It's, quite expensive property. And I realised that we were quite close to Torbay and property prices were a lot cheaper there. And I suddenly started listening to loads of property podcasts, reading some books, just getting there's so much free information out there, isn't there? People feel they need to do really expensive courses, and you so don't. And I did loads of listening, and we ended up buying 2 flats in Torbay on one freehold, and we refurbished them. I kind of very heavily project managed it with a bunch of all kinds of different tradesmen, and me driving backwards and forwards to B&Q and Screwfix and everything else, just to keep costs down. But pulled all our money out of that deal without really realising that was a bit of a clever thing to do. It was partly because I put so much legwork into making it cheap as well. But yeah, really enjoyed that and thought, oh, we'll carry on doing that. And then my husband became unwell with PTSD as a result of his sort of paramedic service combined with his army service. And it kind of reached a crunch point. So it went from this kind of slow burn, we'll do a couple of properties a year, to, we need to make a living out of this. We need to kind of ramp this up a bit. So I just started looking at it a bit more seriously.
What year are we in now?
Pardon?
What year is that now, Lisa?
That was about 2.5 years ago, really.
Oh, wow. I love that. It doesn't take long. I always say that in property, to really ramp things up. So when you first bought those 2 flats, would you say that's longer than 2 years ago?
No, that was, I suppose that was about 2 years ago. Hang on, when did we? 2.5 years ago, we bought the flats.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Incredible what you've done since then, and I know that people are going to love the story. But let me just say hi to Russell Coulthard, who's said, hi Lisa, very impressive to watch your journey since we met.
Hi Ross, it's nice to see you.
And I know that any others of you are watching are going to be impressed with what Lisa's done in 2.5 years. And if you have any questions about getting involved within this type of investing or anything else, do ask them in the comments. So Lisa, there you are now. Actually, before we go into what you actually did, tell us about some of the books and podcasts that really inspired you to get started with this.
The property it used to be called Property Hub, but it's Property Podcast, isn't it now? With the 2 Robs. That was the one I listened to. I just went back through the whole back catalogue. Even just a couple of years ago, there was far fewer podcasts around. Nowadays, there's hundreds of brilliant podcasts, aren't there? I know you've got one. There's lots of such amazing content out there, but then there wasn't as much. So that was a really good one. And the Inside Property with Mike and Victoria Stenhouse, those two were kind of really good ones that I listened to. And then when Tej started, I started listening to his ones as well. But there's just so much free information that you really, really don't need to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, so those are your top three. I listened to the Robs as well, the Property Hub, now the Property Podcast. I listened to the Inside Property Investing with Mike and Victoria as well, originally, obviously, years ago with just Mike and then Victoria. And then, Tej as well. All really amazing because they have such a variety of people on. And as you said, I'm very excited about podcasts at the moment because we've got one, but ours is all about rent to rent. It's not about everything. For anybody watching who's interested in rent to rent, the Rent to Rent Success podcast, please check it out. Anyway, this is not about me. So
it's worth mentioning because there's just great podcasts you can do when you're driving or when you're cleaning or cooking the kids' dinner. I don't know anything. You can just do them. Yeah.
And it's great because it's stories like this where you just see, oh my gosh, that person's been doing it for like 3 years, in your case, just coming up to that. And that's already done so much. So let's get into that so much. So you take us on from, you've got those 2 flats and you've got all your money out and you want to go again. And what happens next?
So I did a progressive course, which is where I met Russ, just to kind of suss that out and realized it wasn't the right thing for me, but that's, that was fine. I then went and a kind of chance encounter led me down the supported living route. And it was through LinkedIn, which is such a powerful platform, isn't it? But I sort of didn't really realize that was a strategy you could do as a private property investor, that you could develop properties for adults, with vulnerable adults with a whole range of different needs who need homes. And that suddenly, once I started sort of exploring that, it just kind of really clicked for me as a brilliant strategy. It just seemed to be, it used my nurse head and my property head, and it just kind of worked. I really loved it. But in developing our first property, we did a bungalow for a vulnerable adult with really complex learning disabilities and a whole range of issues, and this young man had been very difficult to house for quite a while. He'd been sort of a problem for the council, if you like, because he'd been inappropriately housed for so long. And they really, really wanted a solution. They wanted a property that was bespokely developed for him to meet his needs and keep him safe. And we ended up developing that property. So we converted it. It was a detached 2-bed bungalow with an integrated garage, like a 1940s kind of box bungalow. And we converted that to a 3-bed bungalow, but the garage became a bedroom carers suite. So it had an ensuite, and it was a space for the carers to be able to retreat to and come and go from without disturbing the young man who lives there. But doing that property, I encountered loads of problems. From a property investing point of view, supported living, it's a great strategy, but it's not easy, and it's not, there's lots of barriers, and I couldn't find anywhere to go when I found those barriers. So if you're doing HMOs, you've got your fabulous resources, there's loads of information about HMOs. If you're doing serviced accommodation, there's massive stuff about that. If you're looking, if you're looking to do supported living, I was just like, from a property point of view, I couldn't find anything about it. So one of my long-term sort of goals, I kind of jumped a little bit, but I ended up forming this Facebook group. Thank you. Forming it a couple, was it 6 weeks ago, something like that. So, and I was fully expecting someone else to join and say, "Oh, Lisa, there's this group over here that's been going for ages. Do you not know about it?" And it seems that there isn't. And the group's really grown, gathered a whole load of traction, and it just seems to have coincided with people being quite interested in this strategy, seeing it as it can be a really wise business decision, but it is tricky to get right, and it's tricky to get the finance. There's lots of hurdles you have to get over. So the idea of the group is just a place that people who are doing this strategy can meet, and people who are wanting to get into it can mix and find out more about it.
It's such a, so just to clarify, there's a Facebook group.
Yeah.
The name of it is on our screens
Oh, yeah.
here. Supported Living, Property Investing with a Difference. Lisa is the host, and in there you have Lisa Lives
Yeah.
regularly. I watched one with Bronwyn.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was so interesting. I was absolutely captivated, drawn in by all of the opportunities, the different things that both you and Bronwyn and others have done that are in this group.
It's
So,
oh, sorry.
Go on. Keep.
It's such a diverse range, supported living, and as I've as people are coming together, you realize more and more different complex strategies, funding processes, there's more and more stuff. And as part of that, every Monday evening, I do an interview with someone and we just stream it like this is streamed, about someone who's doing something a bit different or a different take on supported living, or who has, and some of them are quite technical, and some of them are more entry level. It really is a real mixture of stuff.
And I'm sure we'll come on to this, but I know that people will be asking the question, because I'm certainly thinking of it. So how can I get involved? Maybe people are already buying HMOs, or they're already buying investment properties. How can people get started?
It is a hard process. It is really hard to get into, and that seems to be one of the big barriers. So people go, oh, I've got this, I really want to do it. And it can be really hard and quite frustrating to find actually what the need is in your area and how you navigate that and get into it. It's really interesting. Since I've started the group, it's become really obvious that there are a lot of property people really interested in this strategy who are finding it really hard to find. You need a registered provider or a housing association to take on the lease, and you need often it ends up with a 3-party arrangement with a housing association registered provider and a care provider and you as the landlord. So you kind of end up with this 3-part process, and you need to get all the pieces of the jigsaw together to make it to work. So I've kind of found that there's a lot of property people who are a bit frustrated because they can't get into it. They can't navigate their way, because local authorities are frustrating places to kind of navigate into, aren't they? But I'm also having conversations with the other side, the care providers and the registered providers, saying we really need properties and we can't find them. So actually it's something I'm working on at the moment, which I'm really excited about, and we're still in the early phases, but a gateway to kind of connect these two different groups and make it easier for people. So there will be more information about that coming out. But it is, the group is just a great place. And if you're interested in it, there's the old interviews are all in there. They're also on our YouTube channel on Pebble Properties. So that if you want to find out that, people talk about the strategies that they use to get in and find the need. And there's a whole range of different ways of doing it.
That's amazing. So actually, you've got your Facebook group, Supported Living Property Investing with a Difference, where people can learn more and be part of the community. You've got your YouTube channel, Pebble Properties. I met you on Facebook, but I've also seen you on Insta. Is it Pebble Properties there?
Pebble Properties on Instagram, as well.
Yeah, and you're also on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Very popular.
Unfortunately, Instagram's not the easiest name to search for on LinkedIn.
Now, we have had some questions.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure that this is a beginner strategy, is it really? But so Epiphany has asked where to start if you don't have capital.
It's a tricky one with this, really, because I've been discussing it with some other people recently about whether you can do this as a kind of rent-to-rent strategy, because obviously you are getting enhanced rates potentially, but because of the long leases and the structure, you'd have to be very, very sure of your the landlord you were renting from, that they were completely on board. Also, it's not necessarily, you are creating a home for life for someone if you're doing the longer term strategies. If you're doing some of the transitional strategies, like the care leavers or the transition from homeless, they can be people who would be living for 6 months, a year, 2 years. But some of the properties, say like the one that we did, the bungalow, that the intention is that will be that young man's home for life, that he will stay there. It's been adapted for him. Sorry, I'm going a bit off course, but it kind of explains how it depends on the tenant group that you're working with as to whether it would be even appropriate to consider a rent-to-rent strategy. It's something I'm exploring, and I'm really keen to understand whether there is a way of doing it, because I kind of feel like there should be, but there's such complex leases involved in the supported living leases that you're kind of adding that onto quite you'd have to have a very complex lease in place with your rent-to-rent arrangement, I think. But you know far more about rent-to-rent than I do, Stephanie. So.
Yeah, I think from my understanding is it's not a beginner's strategy. Because of the relationships that you need to enter into those relationships, you need to be fully confident. So it's good to have a bit of track record behind you and have done some vanilla kind of work beforehand, so that you can go in knowing what you can deliver and know what you can offer and having that confidence. So brilliant question.
Yeah.
Go on.
I was going to say also, if you were looking to finance it you would really struggle to get the finance on this as your first strategy. You do need that kind of vanilla buy-to-let landlord experience before you could do it, as I think most of the mortgage companies would want you to have that.
Oh, look, Alita's saying that I've got great resources. Yeah. But I'm going to thank you so much, Alita. I'm going to, and Stuart's saying the same. Thank you. My fans are on. Thank you, Stuart. Really appreciate it. It's saying the podcast is excellent and that I give too much away. And Epiphany is saying thanks. She's going to start listening. Do you have your own podcast, Lisa?
We were talking about this, weren't we, Stephanie? No, not at the moment. It's on YouTube and it's on in the Facebook group as the lives. The ones that we've done have had some visual content, so I don't think they would necessarily completely translate to a podcast. But yes, I'm not sure about that at the moment.
Yeah, coming soon, Epiphany, I would say. And we've got some slightly off topic, but let's have a go at this. Olaranki said, "Is single let better than HMO properties?"
If you're talking about from supported living point of view, both are required, but they're for different strategies. The demand is more and more towards single lets. Small one bed, small blocks of sort of between 4 and 10 kind of one bed properties would be sort of what a lot of providers are after. There is some need for HMOs, but they generally have to be en suites and have quite large communal space. They're not like the 30-bed HMOs that people might think would work. Actually, that's quite institutional and doesn't work for the majority of the strategies.
Let's come on to some of the actual things that you have then done, Lisa, because you've given us a bit of a painted picture. You've answered some of the questions we've had.
Oh, okay.
The ones you've done.
Okay, so I mean, the bungalow is the really exciting one we got sorted. We have a pub conversion that's just in the process of doing at the moment, which is in Plymouth. That's been a frustration because, and this is one of the problems. So we bought it specifically to create 10 flats for adults with learning disabilities, well, 9 flats, and 1 would be a carer's flat. But the local authority changed their mind halfway through. They said they wanted it, but they wanted it as an extra care facility. So it would be learning disabilities, mental health, and physical disabilities together, which with my nurse head on doesn't really work, and doesn't really work from the structuring the lease and the care provision point of view as well. So from a practical point of view, but we're negotiating with some other people at the moment about taking that on, another vulnerable group, which I'm quite excited about, but it's still really early days. So hopefully that's going to translate into that. The fallback option for that is the site would work very well as a social housing build. It's in an area of regeneration in the city, so there is a fallback option that the building could be leveled and it could become a new build site. So it's kind of, it'll be one way or the other.
So that's kind of showing one of the frustrations there is that one of your big partners can change their mind partway through, leaving you with the building half up, and which says that they're not tied in. You know, that they're not
working with local authorities. You do have to be the one who takes a little bit of a gamble at that point, because it's very, very hard to get it completely agreed. So you can get service level agreements and you can do some stuff to protect yourself. They weren't telling me they didn't want it. They just wanted it for a different purpose that wouldn't really work when we talk to everybody else. So it's it's one of those frustrations, and it's been a little bit of a headache this side, but we're getting there with some progress on it.
So I think what I'm hearing is that it's more frustrating on the build up to it, but whereas an ordinary typical multi-let, then, if you will, even whether it's single units, self-contained units, or an HMO, is going to be more work afterwards on the management side. In this case, depending on the model, I suppose, you know that your tenants are there.
Yeah, absolutely. So once this is set up, so we're also just going through. We've just put an offer in today, but they haven't come back to us because it's Devon and everyone takes about 3 days to make decisions. And I love Devon. I really, really love living here, but it isn't the fastest place for action sometimes. But we're just putting an offer in on an 8-bed block in locally as well, which is definitely, we've got all the go ahead for that, for the learning disabilities. But yeah, once that's set up and running, I'll have a 7-year lease on that property. It's more like a commercial property in that it's really very hands-off. It's a full internal repairing lease. So similar to my bungalow, I don't do anything with that at all now. I don't have to pay letting agents fees. I don't do gas boiler servicing. There's nothing really in the running of that property I need to do. So that's been, you know, they take over that entirely for 5 years, and that will be just repeating, you know. So it is, you're right, it's the setup is where the frustration is, where the grey hairs and the time is spent getting it right. But once you've got it right, then it becomes a really hands-off strategy. But and I would argue it's probably one of the most hands-off property strategies once it's set up. But it's not in this initial phase. That's where the frustration is, you know.
Yeah, that sounds so good to have the 5-year. And can you give us high-level numbers on any of these? You may not be able to, but just to give us an idea.
They're really varied, but so there is massive variation, and that's one thing that's really come to light with the Facebook group is the variation in the rents that people are charging. Some people are getting very, very high rents for just rooms in HMOs, whereas other people are getting nearer LHA rates. So our rates are sort of, the rates that we generally work on are enhanced LHA rates. So then they're sort of around market rate, maybe. But you have to consider that you don't have to take any voids into account. You don't have to take any damages into account. You don't have to take any letting agents fees. You don't have to take your gas boiler servicing, your fire alarm servicing. All of those bits and pieces actually is all taken off you. So it becomes, the numbers actually suddenly look really lovely once you've taken all of those off. Actually, for that 5 years, that 7 years, however long your lease is, you then have that arrangement.
I'm loving the sound of this because basically it really is that as close to a passive investment as you can really get.
Absolutely, once you've got them set up, you know. But yeah, absolutely, once they're there.
And as well as that, as close to a passive investment as you can get, and also it's recession proof. Because you know, if you are letting out on an actual commercial lease to businesses, and then we have a recession hit, like we're going to be in a slowdown likelihood now, then you're in a problem. But whereas when you're letting to people who are vulnerable and possibly can't move as easily,
and it's government backed. Some of these are central government and some of them are local authority funded. The funding structures are slightly different for the different things. But yeah, absolutely. You've got a, you know, unless something very drastic happens with the way the system is run, you've got it. Yeah, I would.
So I know I'm probably delving, but what kind of percentage return? I know it can vary a lot, but based on your experience,
anyone who knows me will know that numbers are the weakest part.
Oh, right, okay.
You told me that, and I've written it all out and researched it for you, Stephanie. Sorry. They're basically, we generally try and pull all or most of our money out of the properties that we're doing because of the way we do the refurbs and refinance them. So they end up being, you know, really high ROIs anyway with a. So yeah, the numbers are always really lovely, but I'm really sorry that's I would have prepared. I'd have had them there on a post-it note for you, so I could have said, "Oh, it's exactly this one for this."
Well, you can go in Lisa's group. Give the name of it again, Lisa.
So it's supported living property investing with a different.
Yeah, and you'll be able to find out more specific within there. So. Tell us a little bit. So you've gone from your start to you started by, well, not by accident as such, but you kind of fell into it.
Yeah.
And then you've now gone on to these bigger properties. And tell us a bit about more your plans for the future.
So the plans, we've got really exciting plans. I'm working with some great business partners. Like I said, we've got this gateway plan to sort of just make it easier for both sides to access and work together. On supported living, which ultimately will mean housing more vulnerable people. So that's really exciting that we can kind of try and pull that together and make that work. And also just at the same time creating, to carry on growing the business and creating more homes for people. I think it's a, you know, the small block model from our point of view works very, very well. This block, if we can get this one up and running that we've put the offer in for today, so that will be 8, it's 8 one-bed flats. 7 of them will be for tenants to live in, and 1 will be a carer's 24-hour care provision for everyone within the block. So, and it's very, very much needed. Where we're looking at doing that, the nearest accommodation for these young people, who these would be young people with learning disabilities who are sort of leaving care or transitioning from education, they have they would have to travel about 2 hours to the nearest appropriate accommodation from where they are. Now, Devon, you know, we all know that the roads in Devon take a long time to get somewhere, but that's 2 hours if you have a car. So if your family don't have a car, you're looking at probably about 3 or 4 hours on public transport. That's just not keeping families together. That's not. So there's a desperate need for that in this area that we're working on at the moment to try and meet that need. So
that's incredible to be able to have that. To be able to be doing providing an amazing service as well at the same time as, you know, having it be a successful business as well. Now, this is maybe what you've hinted at already, which is quite tricky. But what would you say about how to start in approaching the local authority?
I think you want to kind of find a way to establish what the need is in your area. So you can either try and do that directly through, I think the easiest way is to start talking to people personally. So you want to start talking to people you know who work in care, or people you know, or friends of friends who work in care jobs, who are occupational therapists, social workers, physios, nurses in the community. Kind of get chatting to them, and they'll soon start telling you, do you know what, we just have no accommodation for this. You know, we're really struggling with care leaver accommodation at the moment, or we're really struggling with this. And then you need to kind of dig in and find out who the person is you need to speak to about that. Once you've established a need, I very much think it works better if you can do it from a needs driven point of view. So you, in the way that we've done it with this block that we're going through at the moment, we were lucky because we're now in the position that we've kind of got our name out there. People then come to us and say, we really need this, can you sort it out for us? And we're like, that's just the best position to be in. So we're then almost buying property to order, you know, so we're then going, this is exactly what you need. You view the properties with the commissioners and everybody on board. You know, we have 7-8 people on a viewing, everyone having an opinion, and it can be frustrating at times, but it then means that when we make the decision, we've won half the battle. We've got this building that is the closest. You're never going to get perfect, but it's the closest thing that's going to meet the needs of that are wanted. So going back to the question, so talking to everybody, trying to find out what the need is and where what's missing at the moment. The other way would be to do sort of volunteering, you know, because that's another way of meeting people, talking to people, you know, work at your food bank or your homeless shelter, or, you know, and just start sort of just talking to everybody, basically. You'll soon find that friends of friends know someone, or, you know, that someone knows someone who can talk to you about it. But,
yeah, it's surprising when you look at this from the outside and think, actually, there's not a specific person to talk to in the council. It's just...
Well, I mean, there is, but you've kind of got to... they get inundated a little bit, so you kind of need to be a bit cleverer. You could identify the Commissioner for Learning Disabilities in your area and contact them directly, but you probably wouldn't get through to them. You probably would really struggle to get them to call you back. And so if you can then get to the point that by the time you're meeting them, you're saying, I've spoken to this lot here, I know there's a need, and I can suggest that actually, how about there's this great building over here that would really work for that, what do you think? They're going to listen to you far more than going, hello, can you tell me what I should be doing? You know?
Yeah, because they get so many of that type of questions. So there's been a few questions. Somebody was saying, Fab is saying that they would love to go on your training.
Training, but it's all free. Come into the Facebook group. There's loads of stuff on the Facebook group.
Yeah, but I think you may eventually have something to offer to help people a little bit more on a...
Yeah, this gateway will be a different sort of service to help bringing people together across it. So yeah, potentially.
Brilliant. So I suppose you have already mentioned, but is there anything else you want to say about advice for people?
I think it's being being needs led is the thing. I think, you know, I'm getting lots of phone calls from people who are saying they've got, you know, I'm trying to think of a really inappropriate property now. Like I said, the 30-bed HMO idea, you know, something that potentially, I mean, again, that could work for emergency accommodation, but people are trying to almost retrofit their properties to fit the needs.
Yeah.
That can work. And actually, you know, that's where this gateway could bring people together a little bit better. But if you're looking to get into it from the beginning, you kind of need to find out what the need is and get talking to people. And it isn't easy, but often you kind of find an in somehow by talking and establishing what that need is. And I think being also, the thing that worries me a little bit about it at the moment is because, as you mentioned, it is perceived as being recession proof. At the moment, when we've got people who maybe are struggling to fill student HMOs, or their lovely professional tenants suddenly aren't paying the rent, they're thinking, oh, this is the answer, it's easy, we'll just do this. And I think there's a few trainers who've been hinting at the fact it's the easy strategy to get into, and I'm just really passionate about the fact it really isn't easy. You know, it's great, but it's
I suppose it's like any strategy or any business, really, that intention is really important as well. So you have to go in with the intention of, you know, providing that great service, being support, you know, the support in supported living.
Yeah, I mean, you're not providing the support. Generally, you're working with an experienced partner. And that's the other thing. I speak to some people who kind of think, oh, that it'll be really lovely because they can be going in and helping people all the time. And actually, unless you've got that skill set and are actually trained in that and have the knowledge to provide those skills, you know, potentially some of the people you're working with are very, very damaged, have had really, really difficult times with things. They're not necessarily going to want you to walk into their front room and, you know, sit and have a cup of tea with you. They might do. It really varies. But I think you have to be prepared for, like you say, you have to go into it with the right reasons, and you have to realize it's going to be very frustrating at times. You're going to have situations like we've had with our pub. You're going to have lots of frustrations along the way, you know, where you kind of think you've got it cracked and then it isn't, or actually, it's going to take them yes, you've got your lease, but actually they're not going to start it for 2 months, and then suddenly you've got your property for 2 months that you're paying the mortgage on, or, you know,
it's just like property life in general.
Yeah, none of it's easy, is it?
Things happen. There's the good times, but it's so worth it. As Stuart's saying, that it sounds like the organisations would give you their specifications for the property too. So that's a good direction for you to meet the needs.
Absolutely. That's the far better way to be talking to them, understanding, really getting to know them and really understanding what their needs are. And then you as the property person can be the person who solves that. And it's really interesting when you're viewing properties, you know, when I take this bunch of people out and we're viewing properties and they're like, oh, Lisa, it's in a terrible state. You couldn't stop, you know, like, it's fine. Can you not see? We're just knocking that wall down. We're going to the garage. So many people can't see that, can they? If their heads aren't sort of in property, they just can't visualize that. Oh, yeah, but it's got horrible wallpaper. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. We'll probably pull that wall down, you know.
No, I love that. Have you had that? Have you always had that lease?
I think so. Yeah. Have you?
I think I've developed it. Nikki, I think, has always had it. She's a bit more intuitive about how the building works, about how to do the refurbs and how all of that works. When I hear her talking to the contractors, I don't think they're speaking a different language. So it really is a great partnership. I think I've got the better end of the
but that's the great thing about having that partnership, isn't it, and those different skill sets. But so that's where you become the property person in that situation. You become their problem solver and say, I can find the property to help you with that, basically. So
well, that's brilliant. Tell us about, because we're talking about as well, it's being a property game changer, and that starts off first of all with the changes within your life. So tell us about how it's changed things for you and your family since you started in property.
I suppose it's meant that I was going to say I'm available more as a mum, but I'm probably not the last few weeks because I've been on Zoom so much. but in theory, the idea is the business fits much better around my children, so I can, you know, be there for them when I need to. They're a bit older now, so they're, you know, they're a bit more self-contained. But I think that's made a massive difference. And I think being able to be around for my husband when he's not been very well as well, that's been really important, and that flexibility to kind of be able to prioritize stuff. I think that's been massive. And having, I found it really refreshing coming from the NHS, where it's very hierarchical, very salary driven. It's been really refreshing working for myself and being able to be creative and work out how to problem solve with properties and problem solve with situations. And I really love getting my teeth into that. That's been really fun.
And you're in charge.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah.
If it goes wrong, you can't blame anyone else, though, can you?
I've really loved that. I found it quite surprising, actually, to know that I can run things, and I don't think I would have guessed that before.
Didn't you? What was your where were you before?
Well, I'd had all sorts of different things, but when I first got into property, I was working as a contractor in financial services.
Right.
Which felt a bit like winning the lottery. I'd been on a bit of a up and down roller coaster, which we won't go into. Right. And I was delighted to find that these roles were really quite well paid, and essentially the job was pretty straightforward, but quite pressurized.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But it didn't really suit my skill set. I'm not really a detail person, and it was a detailed job, so it used to fry my brain a bit. But now, we get to be creative. We get to make things happen. I love those transformations that you're talking about when you see the building.
They're brilliant. Yeah.
Go from something that's absolutely disgusting and it's a crime that anybody was living in there previous, and to something that is really that people are going to love to live in, that they're going to be
happy. Massive change to people's lives, won't it? Because where you live makes so much difference, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that came to me while I was talking to you is that I have actually talked to some people who are giving the support. That's part of they're employing teams of people to provide this really specialized support that you're talking about. So let's just quickly talk about that, because that's not what you have been doing thus far.
No, and that's not a model I plan to go down. I think it's brilliant if you can get it right, but I think there's a lot of potential for it to go wrong. I think with my nurse head, I'm probably quite cautious around actually who's that going to be on Sunday morning when someone doesn't turn up for shift. You're going to be the one in there. It's not really the business that I was designing in the fact that we wanted this to be a hands-off business, so that actually we can go and mess around on the water or do the things that we love doing in Devon. I don't really want to be the one at 7 in the morning on a Sunday crisis managing someone not turning up for work. Perhaps I've done that too much in nursing. So I think it's but it is very, very different doing that part of it. So it becomes more of a business and more of a, but it's very, very rewarding, because you get that direct interaction with the people who are living in the properties, and you get to see the transitions that happen if the right support's given. The person I saw talking about it was, you could just see that this was her world, and she loved it. But I think that would be a bit worrying for people who haven't had that. No, absolutely, and that's a very different model. We're looking at it from a property investment model, where you end up being a superior landlord and a very sort of hands-off landlord. You're not expected to be in doing those things.
And before we close off this evening, Lisa, tell us a little bit, you have already mentioned, about your plans for the future, and about your plans for the future.
So we're looking at working more in this space, because as you can tell, it's something I'm really passionate about. I feel it's something that needs to be made more accessible for people to invest in, more accessible for the companies who need, and the organizations who need property, to access those properties in a timely way. So we're hoping this gateway we're creating will bring people together, and to create more homes as well. That's the ultimate aim, is housing more vulnerable people. I'm really excited about the plans that are coming. It might be a lot of hours on Zoom, but it'll be worth
it. I think that is so true, because the vulnerable people have been neglected somewhat by private landlords, because of the changes that the government made, which made it really very difficult for a private landlord who's maybe just got 1 or 2 properties to actually house vulnerable people.
I think it's partly that, and partly that your average private landlord who doesn't understand the system doesn't necessarily want someone who, perhaps when they're anxious, will rip a door off the hinges or will punch a wall. or, you know, because it's not set up, you know, if you go into that and that's your property and you understand that's exactly how it's going to be and you've set it up as for that, with the to making it as secure as you can. But yeah, it doesn't fit a standard property model. If this is a, you know, like a lot of accidental landlords, it might be the house they grew up in that was their parents' house. It's got emotional attachment, hasn't it? They want a lovely, nice, standard family to live in that house, don't they? You know, they can't envisage something else happening with it. So you have to kind of structure the property very differently and approach it in a different way. So yeah.
Okay, and is there anything else that you want to leave
Well, I
people
was going to
with?
ask you, Stephanie, to talk about your mentor circle that's come out.
Yeah, well,
I think that sounds really exciting.
I need to give a big shout out to Tunde Yusuf, who's started up the Mentor Circle, and you'll be able to see this on my Facebook, Stephanie Taylor on Facebook. But I think it's, I can't remember the web address, but I think it's Mentor Circle. It'll either be .com or .co.uk.
It's all on the social medias, isn't it? It's all there. So
yeah, and it's for young people, designed to help them to get started in business, entrepreneurship, and I'm delighted to be a part of that. And I thank Tunde for asking me, but it's his initiative with his team, and yeah, I'm delighted to be involved with the Mentor Circle. And Germail's asking, what are you guys offering with the Mentor Circle? And it is for young people aged between 18 and 25, I think are the ages, but it's for young people to help them get started in business, and with a particular focus, I believe, on people of Afro-Caribbean descent. So thank you for bringing that up.
No, it's really important. Well. It looks great.
It does. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
If you would like to find out more about what Lisa is offering and talking about, and Lisa's community, do go to the Facebook group Supported Living. What was the
Investing with a Difference? I could have gone with a shorter title, couldn't I?
Investing with a Difference. It's not that long, but hey. Supported Living, Investing with a Difference is the Facebook group. Then there's Pebble Properties on YouTube and on Instagram and on LinkedIn, Lisa Brown. So you can follow up with Lisa if you really want to get into this. And thank you, Lisa, for giving up part of your Friday evening to join us here live. It's been amazing to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.